Hi, I'm Sara and welcome to Hen Corner. As you know, we like to produce as much of our own food as possible and we like to make food from scratch. Now, one of my dreams has been to keep more livestock than we've currently got. We've currently got the chickens and the bees out in the garden, but I would love to have a goat for milking and making cheese, and I'd love to keep a couple of pigs. Now sadly we've got no space in our London back garden, so what we do is we make sure that we buy meat where possible from friends that are rearing their own livestock. A lot of the time we'll get our meat from Farmer Dixon, Gillian Dixon down at South Yeo Valley Farm East, but something that I have been doing recently is watching my good friend Elsa, who's also a beekeeper and also keeps chickens at home, because Elsa keeps pigs in a farm just up the road here in West London. And this week her lovely pigs had to say goodbye. It was the end of their life, their very, very good life, and they came back from the abattoir and the butchers just a couple of days ago. So I'm always first in the line to say, please can I have some of your meat, because I know that animals have had such a good life, and it's really important if an animal has died for our dinner that we eat every single part of it. So today we are making bacon. We've got a lovely piece of belly pork here. It's interesting because belly pork used to be seen as one of the cheaper cuts of meat, but it's become so popular, probably because chefs have thought, how can we use these cheaper cuts of meat? And now it's on the top menus, the top restaurants, and so a belly pork cut, belly pork joint, whilst it's got quite a bit of fat in it, can be just as expensive as one of the prime cuts such as leg and shoulder. But this makes for the perfect streaky bacon. I love making it. You know, it's got no nasties going into it, and there's no unnecessary chemicals or preservatives, and because we know where the animals have come from, we know that there's no antibiotics, there's no drugs, and there's no hormones. It's just the happiest pig, and it's going to make for the most beautiful bacon. Now I'm going to base this recipe on one that I've got from River Cottage Meat. I do love all the work of Hugh and the team at River Cottage. In fact, I started my beekeeping journey down there, and we're adapting it slightly based on what we've got, because I'm a firm believer in raiding your cupboards, see what ingredients you've got. Don't go and buy things that you're only going to use for one recipe. See what we've got. So the process of making bacon is preserving the meat, and we're preserving it by using salt, and the salt draws the moisture out of the meat, a lot of the moisture, unnecessary moisture. It flavours it, yes, but it also creates an environment which makes it very difficult for bacteria to grow. So salting meat, curing meat, is a process that's used for preserving the meat and making it last a lot longer. And a big slab of bacon like this can be hung in a garden shed, wrapped in muslin to protect it from flies. And it's a way that people have been using, a process that people have been using for thousands and thousands of years, to keep their meat safe, particularly in the days before refrigeration. So what we're going to do, we've got this nice bit of meat. Before we touch the meat, we're going to make the cure. And the cure I'm making with predominantly salt. I've got 250 grams here of grey salt. Now this is sea salt collected from salt marshes, and it's really high in natural minerals and trace elements. It's got lots of goodness, no nasties at all, and this is the salt we're using, but you can use whatever salt you've got to hand. I just happen to have some of this left over from making gravlax on a previous occasion. Now we're going to sweeten this with some sugar. I've got 130 grams of brown sugar that we're going to pop into there as well. That's going to give us a lovely sweet bacon. I've got some bay leaves just picked from the garden. I'm going to tear them because the oils, the flavours are inside the leaves, and if you tear them, you're increasing the surface area, and the salt can draw out some of the flavour from the bay as well, to flavour the salt, which then will in turn flavour the bacon. So we've just got a few bay leaves here, and they smell amazing just as I'm tearing them. And the last thing we're going to add, we're going to have some spices. Oh, do you know what? Put that in, it saves less tidying up later. Some spices. So into my pestle and mortar, I've got some black peppercorns. These are really big ones. I've got them from I've given them as a gift. Someone had been on holiday. So I've got some black peppercorns. Notice I use the word some quite a lot. I've got some cloves. Some of them have a bit crushed up already. I've got some cinnamon bark. And I've got some star anise. Do you know what? I'm going to do that thing where you pick out the ones that are already broken, because do you know what? They're most of them broken. I was going to save the whole ones for another thing where you wanted whole star anise. So I'm just going to give these a little bit of a smash. It's just to increase the surface area, to allow the oils to come out, and then this will flavour the salt and the sugar before we rub it onto the meat. We're not looking at a fine powder, we're just giving it a bash. So with these bashed up, we're going to put them in with the salt and the sugar mixture, and I'm going to give it a bit of a stir through with my hands. We're just combining. We've got the salt, which draws the moisture out of the meat, and then we've got the sugar and the bay leaves and the spices to flavour it. And what will happen, we'll rub it onto the meat, and then as the liquid comes out of the meat, the excess moisture, it will start to dilute, it will start to, the salt and the sugar will dissolve in that liquid, and we'll end up with a liquid brine, but not adding any water, just the moisture coming from the meat. So I've got it in a plastic tray here, and this is a lovely bit of meat. It's about 1.5 kilos. It's about a third of a belly. You can get a whole side of belly pork. It's already got some cuts in it, which is great because it means the salt can go through in those cuts. Really lovely, look at that, really nice, good amount of meat. And we've got that lovely marbling of the fat, and that is going to be beautiful for our bacon. So I'm going to start off on the meat side, and I'm going to take a handful of this and I'm going to press it in. And we want to get the salt in contact with every bit of exposed meat. So starting on the inside, on the meat side, and then we'll come through onto the skin on the outside. Make sure we've got some on all the cut surfaces. And then we can turn it over. And then we can rub the rest into the top. Whoa. Give it a good massage. Now what will happen as the moisture is drawn out of the meat will become a lot firmer. It will appear to shrink a little bit, not loads, but obviously it's losing water, and then the water will turn the sugar and the salt into a liquid brine. Now what I'm going to do, whoa, I've got a lid for this container. This is actually a marinating tray. It's brilliant. It's got some little don't know what to call them on the inside, little sort of spikes, which means that meat can be sitting on top of these with all the marinade underneath. So by sealing this on the top, this can go directly into the fridge. Now if you haven't got one of these, you can put it in a plastic bag. You don't want to use anything that's made of metal, so you could have it in a glass tray with cling film over the top, and you can take it out and turn it over each day if you want to. Have it in a plastic food bag and flip it over each day, give it a bit of a massage. Really trying to reduce the single-use plastic, so this is perfect. This is going to go in the fridge. We have got fridges. If you haven't got a fridge, you can put it outside somewhere cold, particularly if it's the colder months of the year. Put it in a shed or an outhouse. But this is going to go in the fridge. And then what I'm going to do every day, I'm just going to flip it over. Here is bacon day 3. We've had it in the fridge, our belly pork with that lovely cure of salt and sugar and spices massaged into it. We flipped the whole container over on day 2 and earlier on today, and now we're going to see what's inside. Oh my goodness, smells amazing. Now there's quite a bit of liquid in here, and that's because the salt has drawn moisture out of the meat, so it's gone from sort of a dry cure to a wet cure. You can see all that liquid in there. But we are going to give it a bit of a rub, massage that salt in, make sure it's going around all the edges. There we go, on every side. And then that can go back in the fridge, and we will continue to flip it over carefully every day, and then we'll come back on day 5 and look at the next stage. So let's see what it's like on its final day. Whoa, here we go. Now, some of the salt is still in the granules. It hasn't dissolved. That's absolutely fine. But yet there is quite a lot of liquid at the bottom of this tray here. So you can see that the salt has pulled out quite a lot of moisture, which has dissolved the sugar and the salt. And this is really quite firm now. So all we're going to do, we don't need the extra salt. So I am going to give this a quick rinse. I'm going to discard this. We don't need this anymore. I'm going to give the belly pork a bit of a rinse to get rid of the lumps of cinnamon and cloves and the excess salt. And I'm going to show you how we're going to store it. So this literally washed clean. You can see how firm it is. That's because it's lost a lot of moisture. We're going to use some kitchen towel just to dry it. Just pat it dry. And then we're going to store it in a way that it keeps it clean, but we don't want it we don't want it to get too damp or humid. So we're not going to have it in an airtight container. We want it to be able to continue to breathe. So how we're going to store this is just wrapped up in a bit of muslin or linen. And so I've got some linen here. And I'm going to literally, in fact, this is what I used for draining my marmalade, draining the oranges, the piths of my oranges the other day. So it's washed, and now I'm ready to wrap my bacon in it, and just loosely wrapping it like this. If you don't have a fridge, going back to the old-fashioned days of preserving, curing, that can actually be hung in an outhouse or a garage or a shed. You want to hang it so that it doesn't attract vermin or anything crawling to it. But if you have got a fridge, just pop this in the fridge. It will continue to dry out a bit more because obviously we've just added some water to rinse it off. That's quite firm, and we can slice off slices of that, fry it up, be absolutely gorgeous. This is a moment of truth for our bacon. I've got a griddle pan preheating. I've got our big piece of pork belly here that we've cured. We're going to cut it up, slice it as thin as possible, and have ourselves the most amazing bacon sandwich. Right, that's the way I'm going to slice it. Okay. Top down, I think. Here we go. Very sharp knife, slow, even strokes. Oh, my goodness. Look at that. Straight into the pan. Oh, sizzling straight away. Let's cut the next bit down. Perfect rashers of bacon frying in the pan. Got some lovely homemade bread and some good quality ketchup, and I think that the smell is soon going to get around the house and I'm going to have the family come begging. Some lovely homemade bread. Look at this. Oh my goodness. And then cheeky bit of ketchup. And haha, here we go for the best bacon sandwich ever. My homemade bread, Elsa's hand-reared pigs. I'm looking forward to lunch. See you next time.